Consumers need to be able to plan for their budgets. They need to have reasonable expectations around what their utility provider is going to do. And stability just helps take out the shocks and the whiplash effect.
Control and wholesale power costs gives us the ability to keep rates stable at the retail end.
Having a stable position just lets everybody do their planning.
Stability for the organization and ultimately stability for the member distribution systems which support the G&T. That stability not only has organizational benefits, it means lower cost.
It's the market, you know, it's the pressure of natural gas and wind energy on the electrical side of things. I don't see that going away.
Without that stable position, you know, that causes a lot of consternation within the troops.
With everything that Basin's doing, hopefully we'll have a plan where we'll be able to get through it and come out stronger than we are today.
Stability and lower cost ultimately help improve member satisfaction. And of course, we're all in the business of improving and managing and trying to make better member satisfaction. So I think it all works together.
Good morning. It's good to be here this morning to provide you with an update on the financial affairs of your G&T. From the CFO's perspective, it's important to have a strong financial foundation so we can build and then operate and maintain the assets needed to provide reliable and affordable energy to you, our members. 10 years ago, we started building more generation and transmission assets to meet growing energy needs. With that nearly complete, we're now entering the stage that focuses on maintaining and operating those assets. Now, the financial footing of your cooperative has changed drastically over the past decade. Before I dive into the financial news and highlights for late 2017 and 2018, let me give you a few differences to help quantify the changes that occurred over the last 10 years as a result of our significant construction phase. As of December 31st, 2007, the book value of our total electric plant, net of depreciation, was a bit north of $1.5 billion. As of December 31st, 2017, the net book value stood at $4.6 billion, an increase of approximately 206%. Total consolidated assets as of December 31st, 2007 were $2.9 billion. As of December 31st, 2017, total assets on a consolidated basis were almost $7.7 billion, an increase of nearly 2.7 times. In 2007, we operated 3,518 megawatts of wholesale electric generation and owned 1,790 miles of high voltage transmission, 56 substations, and 101 telecommunication sites. 10 years later, we had just under 6,700 megawatts of winter generating capability, over 2,500 miles of high voltage transmission, 80 substations, and over 200 telecommunication sites. Now, all that growth hasn't come without a cost. With the additional generation and transmission assets, our utility operation and maintenance expenses have risen from approximately $580 million in 2007 to over $1.2 billion in 2017, even in light of significant and ongoing austerity efforts. At the end of 2007, Basin Electric's consolidated long-term debt totaled just under $1.35 billion. 10 years later, long-term debt on a consolidated basis that was outstanding was nearly $4.65 billion. So, as one would expect, with all that growth and build-out, there's been pressure on our average member real rate as that too has increased, growing from around 30 mils 10 years ago to 63.7 mils. That has been our average member rate since August of 2016 and will remain so for 2019 as well. In addition to what we've already discussed, what else is affecting or impacting our member rate that's causing it to be higher than what we're currently seeing in the market. Frankly, it's the costs associated with all the capital commitments we've just been discussing. Depreciation on our utility plant went from approximately $70 million in 2007 to $147 million in 2017, in essence doubling. And that's even after we did extensive depreciable life extensions in 2016, when we extended the lives of many of our coal units to 60 years and changed the lives of our gas assets from 33 years to 50 years. Now, the even larger component is interest expense. In 2007, the interest expense on our utility plant was $78.5 million. That grew to $206.3 million in 2017. These two components alone increased by over $205 million from the year 2007 to the year 2017, an increase of nearly 140%. And yet we're somewhat fortunate, as the average interest rate on our outstanding debt fell 110 basis points from 5.58% to 4.48% over the course of that decade, saving us, and ultimately you, the membership, millions of dollars in interest expense. On a positive note, all indicators are pointing to that decade of construction and associated costs, along with mill rate increases coming to a close, and the cooperative being on the path of stability that is so vitally important, as Tim, Randy, and Vic noted in the opening video. Shifting gears just a bit, 2017 was a very good year financially. Due to our strong operating results, a change in the corporate income tax rate from 35% to 21%, and the merger of the Prairie Wind subsidiaries into Basin Electric, we were able to defer $170 million of revenue and still achieve a consolidated net margin of approximately $72.3 million. Now, with the addition of last year's deferred revenue, we currently have just under $193 million of deferred revenue available. This pool of deferred revenue, which in simple terms we can liken to a savings account, will be a key component in our efforts of financial and rate stability. As we leave the raw numbers of this financial report, I want to talk briefly about our annual audit. The plan for the 2017 audit was presented to our board in September of last year. That was followed by some interim field work, with interim field work also being conducted in November and December, and then Deloitte staff being in Bismarck full-time during the month of February. Our goal, as always, is to receive unqualified opinions for the audited financial statements of Dakota Coal Company, Dakota Gasification Company, Souris Valley Pipeline, and then Basin Electric on a consolidated basis. In order to achieve that goal, we need to ensure the proper financial book and tax accounting for all transactions. Once again, I'm happy to report that the audit reports for Basin Electric and its subsidiaries all came with clean or unqualified opinions. The complete results for 2017 were published in our annual report, which was mailed in late April. By now, I'm certain most all of you have seen it, but in the event that you haven't, there should be copies available at the registration desk for your review. In addition to the financial narrative and a review of all current projects and operational activities, the annual report includes consolidated footnotes and consolidated financial statements and associated footnotes, as well as that very important auditor's opinion. You can also access the annual report as well as our consolidated quarterly financial statements on our website. The audit is an exhaustive process and one that has staff burning the midnight oil and working many weekends. I'm sure this year will be even more trying and I'm sure tiring, as we'll be going through the process with far fewer staff. In advance, I would like to thank staff from throughout the cooperative for their efforts in this extremely important endeavor. Since we were together a year ago, we've amended and extended 3 revolving credit facilities totaling over $1.1 billion of liquidity. These facilities backstop our commercial paper program and allow us to borrow money on a short-term basis relatively quickly. The first extension occurred in December of last year. At that point in time, we upsized one of our credit facilities from $400 million to $500 million and extended the maturity date of that facility from December of 2018 to December of 2022. In March, we extended the maturity date of a $130 million bilateral facility with CFC. This facility backstops our tax-exempt commercial paper program. That facility now has a maturity date of March of 2023. Then in August, we extended the maturity date of the $500 million credit facility that backstops our taxable commercial paper program. That facility now has a maturity date of August 28th of 2023. Now both our $500 million facilities drew significant interest from the financial community as we had total commitments far in excess of the $500 million we were looking for in each instance. As you can see from the slide on the screens, we have a very strong and broad group of financial institutions participating in our credit facilities. We thank them for their continued support of the Basin Electric credit. One additional financial institution we'd like to thank is the Bank of North Dakota. Through participation agreements with U.S. Bank and CoBank, the Bank of North Dakota holds $70 million of this book of business in its portfolio. It's nice to have that local support and keep a bit of that business at home. Another financial transactions we've been analyzing and working on this past year is the lease of our Antelope Valley Station Unit Number 2. In 1985, we entered into a leveraged lease of that transaction, as that was the least expensive means of financing at the time, even cheaper than borrowing from RUS. The lease had an initial maturity date of December 30th of 2015, but in 1995, in conjunction with the refinancing of the tax-exempt component of that lease, we agreed to extend the maturity date to December 31st of 2020. Per the terms of that lease agreement, prior to the end of this year, we are to notify the lessors of our intent to either renew the lease, to purchase the asset at its fair market value, or return the lease portion to the lessors upon lease maturity. So in April, we notified the lessors, who own approximately 343 megawatts of that unit, that we would be returning their respective interests to them at the end of the lease term. Now I should note, we own the remaining 107 megawatts as we purchased that back in 2015. But ultimately, what does returning the lease portion mean for the membership? First, less reliance on or exposure to coal, and second, the opportunity to purchase that approximately 340 megawatts of energy on the open market, currently at rates cheaper than what we can generate it for ourselves. Moving on, our member investment program is a financing vehicle that provides significant benefits to both Basin Electric and the membership. For Basin Electric, it's an additional source of short-term capital. For our members, it's an alternative mechanism where they can invest their excess funds at very competitive rates. This program has grown substantially since its inception several years ago. Earlier, I made reference to financial statement balances from a decade ago. In 2007, the end-of-the-year balance of the member investment program was $80.2 million. On September 27th, or just 5 or 6 weeks ago or so, we set an all-time record of nearly $291.6 million in the member investment program. To our members, thank you for your continued support of this mutually beneficial program. I now want to spend a few minutes talking about our financial forecasts. This is a long process and one that takes hundreds and hundreds of hours of staff time. It's a process that starts in February and normally ends in August with the approval of the forecasts by the respective boards. Now, this past forecasting process has been much different, however. While our starting time was the same, it certainly didn't end in August. In fact, it's still ongoing. While we'll have go into further detail tomorrow during the members-only session, let me set the stage a bit. In February, we started gathering the pricing data for the major commodities affecting our forecasts. Now, our focus for the next few minutes will be on DGC. Here you're seeing the prices that we were using in our forecast for two of our major commodities. The blue line would be what's in this year's forecast, and the green line what was being used in last year's forecast. Now you're probably noticing a trend, and it would be even more evident if we were to show the prices for our other commodities as well. In nearly every instance, the prices we're using are lower than what we used in last year's forecast. To refresh your memory, here are the losses we had in DGC's financial forecast from last year. Now, based on the prices we just discussed, one could intuit that the results would only be worse. As we worked our way through the forecasting process, that intuition, in fact, came to fruition. A couple months ago, as we were nearing what would have been the end of our normal forecasting process, a couple staff and I met with Paul to discuss the preliminary results. During those discussions, Paul used a phrase, one that many of you have probably have heard him use in the past, and that being, "This dog don't hunt." Now, I'll note that Paul had a few other comments as well, and those were a lot more colorful than what I just quoted, so I'll refrain from sharing those at this point in time. But in all seriousness, it was at that point that we knew that something had to be done, which led in part to the reduction in force that both Chairman Peltier and Paul mentioned in their presentations. So we went to the board, told them we needed more time. We postponed the July managers meeting and proceeded to work on cases that included the reduction in force, additional cost reductions across all entities, reduced capacity factors at DGC, and a bit of an increase in the member load on the Basin Electric side. Now, needless to say, the results look drastically different. While there are still projected losses at DGC, the benefits to the Basin family of having DGC continue to operate are once again greater than the projected losses, and this ultimately leads to a lower average member rate. Now, for Basin Electric, things look very good from a financial perspective. We're able to maintain a consolidated margin of somewhere between $70 and $75 million, which we believe puts us firmly in the middle of the A category by the rating agencies, which, as we've mentioned before, has been one of our strategic initiatives for the last couple of years. The reason we're working to solidify our ratings is because there's an increase in borrowing costs as one's rating degrades. Along with the consolidated margin I just mentioned, we're also able to build a substantial deferred revenue pool, all while holding the member mill rate steady throughout the forecast period. Bottom line, we're working very hard to stabilize our average member mill rate, as well as solidify the ratings assigned to us by the rating agencies. Regarding our ratings, in July and August, we visited with the three agencies that rate us. At that time, we discussed our 2017 end of year and 2018 year-to-date financial results, our very preliminary financial forecasts and associated actions, as well as our strategic initiatives and plans going forward. We told them we would be back later this year to discuss our board-approved financial forecasts, our more current 2018 year-to-date financial results, as well as an update on a potential asset impairment at DGC. These meetings are scheduled for December 5th and 6th. As far as rating action, in June, Moody's affirmed our senior secured rating of A3 with a stable outlook. S&P and Fitch continue to monitor the Basin Electric credit as both entities have our long-term rating at A with a negative outlook. Now, that negative outlook being our focus as we aim to move that outlook back to stable. I'd like to point out that we have notable credit strengths, one of those being the strong financial performance by the core G&T electric operations. Another strength is the cooperative model itself, which allows for rate-setting autonomy. There are also those very important long-term wholesale power contracts. For a number of years, we have stated that the linchpin to the Basin Electric credit are those long-term all-requirements contracts. And then, of course, standing behind those contracts is the creditworthiness of our membership. Another strength is our size and stature compared to our peers, which allows for a diversity in generation mix, a diversity in load serve, as well as serving an expansive geographic region. Along with that, and they've noted that we have an experienced management team as well as a very engaged board of directors. And then finally, good liquidity with internal cash generation at the core G&T operations, supplemented by quality external bank facilities, which we discussed a bit earlier. As one would expect, we also have some known credit weaknesses, those being a substantial carbon footprint for the utility operations. Now, right or wrong, all the agencies believe that the public perception will continue to be that carbon is affecting our environment and there will be pressure to reduce carbon emissions. Given our reliance on fossil fuels, they note that we'll probably be confronted with dealing with that sometime in the future. Not surprisingly, another weakness is our natural gas and byproduct commodity price exposure at DGC. And then finally, the need to sustain Basin Electric's key credit metrics at stronger levels in a globally pressured commodity environment. Bottom line, we believe we have a very good story to tell and will continue to convey that message. As I mentioned earlier, we currently have approximately $193 million of deferred revenue. We were looking to add to that balance in 2018, but with the larger than anticipated losses at DGC, currently that doesn't appear likely. As we've been stating for the past couple of years, we want to take steps to eliminate any further inter-year rate increases. Given the size of our organization, $7.4 billion in assets as of September 30th, and $1.8 billion in revenue through the first 3 quarters of the year. In discussions with you, the membership, we've determined that a deferred revenue pool of about $75 million is prudent. This is to be used in the event we have another abnormally mild winter followed by a cool, wet summer, similar to what we experienced in 2015 and 2016, and our loads and associated revenues don't materialize as projected. Now, in addition to this pool, which is to be used for margin stabilization, we would look to have additional deferred revenue available in the event we need to impair or write down the book value of some of our assets. Currently, we're reviewing the impairment of what we refer to as the gas assets at DGC. We're in the midst of that study, and again, we'll have a more in-depth discussion in tomorrow morning's membership meeting. So how do we get there? For one, the membership will be asked later this afternoon to approve an amendment to the bylaws that will remove the existing $200 million limitation on deferred revenue and replace it with a $300 million cap with the stipulation that the limitation reverts to $200 million after December 31st of 2023. Now, a topic that is near and dear to every co-op member is patronage capital, especially its return to the membership. In March, Basin Electric allocated $72.1 million to its members. Since 1966, the Cooperative has allocated nearly $1.1 billion in capital credits and has retired $249.6 million. And this is inclusive of the $25 million that was retired in December of last year. And then, just on Monday, 2 days ago, the board approved the retirement of another $30 million of patronage that was allocated in 2001. This retirement is a bit more than 1/30 of our total undistributed allocated margins. We plan to distribute the $30 million in early December. Prior to closing, I'd like to take a moment to talk about another asset, the one that we say is the most valuable and the one that Paul mentioned in his opening remarks. And yet it's one that's difficult to quantify. That asset, of course, being our employees. This past year was filled with much stress and strain due to both internal and external factors. Difficult decisions had to be made regarding the reduction in force and deeper austerity measures. At about the same time we were going through that, many employees were going through their yearly performance evaluations. As part of that evaluation process, employees are able to provide comments on such things as their own work performance or their future goals or their future initiatives. I would like to share in part one particular employee's comments, and I quote, "This year has been filled with opportunities and challenges. Through hard work and dedication, I've been able to continue to expand my knowledge within our department and take on new duties. It's a great feeling to be part of a team that works well together to have the same common goal. My life is built around these three things: my family, my faith, and my work. It takes a good balanced lifestyle to achieve happiness in all these things. It's easy to say that I love what I do and coming to work each day. I will continue to have a positive attitude/outlook and work hard so that any challenge that presents itself will be handled in the best way possible. And to me, here's probably the most gratifying part of that employee's comments. I pray that the remainder of 2018 and all the years to come brings the best for our membership and Basin Electric as a whole. Now, I'm certain this employee's commentary is an accurate reflection of hundreds of employees throughout the Basin Electric family. That's why Basin Electric stands united and ready to serve the needs of you, our members. Thank you.